Welcome to Know Before You Go for the 26th Sunday in Ordinary Time. My name is Father Brian Walker. It is amazing as we look at the gospel for today, the first thing that Jesus talks about is he tells the disciples, "We saw a man preaching in your name and casting out demons, and he was not of our company. So we tried to stop him." And Jesus said, "Why? Why?" It reminds me of when I was a child and I grew up before Vatican II. And part of that growing up was we were constantly told who we could associate ourselves with, whose church we could go to. Oh, we were never allowed to go into a Protestant church because Lord knows what they could teach us. So we just stayed away, or at least that's what we said we would do. The reason why I was so skeptical is because everybody in my family belongs to a Protestant religion, some kind of religion that is not Roman Catholic. And so, in many ways, I would constantly hear these stories about how these people were not going to go to heaven. And I kept thinking to myself, how on earth can you say that? This is my grandmother, my grandfather, aunts and uncles, and all because they're not Roman Catholic? We were just the chosen ones, and they were not. I couldn't believe that. I refused to believe that, and even to this day, I refuse to believe it. I freely go into any church because I believe that God can be found in many different places, not just the places that we choose to find him in. And then another thing that kind of got to me was the fact that in this same gospel, we hear about those who do not do the right thing. Well, they should choose between their limbs and their salvation. And I thought, well, what is that all about? We have to make sure that our hands don't deceive us, our tongues don't deceive us, our eyes don't deceive us. And it's better to cut these things off, even as Jesus says. It's better to cut these things off and to go into heaven maimed. But then I was sent to a place as a novice where I had to work with those who were challenged. And most of them were officials, meaning that they were soldiers who had gone through some sort of trauma. And so I kept thinking about that. And there's one young man in particular who had had some problems where he thought that he was constantly being tempted by the devil. And in that temptation, he felt that his eyes were deceiving him. And so he went so far as to pour bleach into his eyes. Why? Because he thought that this would save him. We have to be very careful about taking these words so literally. We have to be careful and we have to make sure that we do our best to teach those parts of our bodies, our eyes, our hands, even our tongue, to not deceive us, to not lead us into a path that could be destructive. Many, many people, especially that go to church today, you know it as well as I do, are not always the best people. But that's the struggle. We're all on the road to perfection. We're all on the road to perfection. But the problem is that sometimes we are weak. Sometimes we fall into deceptive practices, and sometimes those things can lead us into a destructive path. All we have to do is look at the political arena. How often have we heard that in our different speeches and things that we've seen on television, debates and all? I find myself not feeling better because I've watched these things, but thinking to myself, how can I be better? How can I be a better Christian? How can I be a better follower of Jesus? But first, I have to recognize that I am weak. I have to recognize that these things are there to tempt us and not to follow these practices. So, my sisters and brothers, as we look at the gospel today, let us think, are there certain things that we know that we can do better? Are there certain things that we can do better? So I ask you to look into your own hearts. It's not about judging somebody else, but looking into your own hearts and seeing what you can do to be a better follower of Jesus Christ. May the Lord strengthen us each and every day and to be able to recognize those weaknesses in our lives so that we can be a better people. Amen.